we're limited in what we know. We're limited by our perspective. We're limited by our experience. And so by taking into account that there's no way that any one of us knows all of the causes and conditions that lead up to each moment, that can seem a little bit scary, but actually when you internalize it, it's a relief. So then we just do the best we can.
You're listening to the Mindful Mama podcast, episode 180. Today, we're talking about how to practice mindfulness together with our kids with Susan Kaiser Greenland. Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast. Here, it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I help smart, thoughtful parents stay calm so they can have strong, connected relationships with their children. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting course coming up soon, and I'm the author of the upcoming new book, Raising Good Humans, which is available for pre-sale. Woot, 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 woot. So go to raisinggoodhumansbook.com. Learn more. I have book bonuses, all kinds of great stuff. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm going to give you the whole first chapter and more. So go to raisinggoodhumansbook.com and check it out. Woohoo! So welcome to the podcast. Dear listener, welcome. I am glad you are here. I'm glad to be in your ears, whether you are driving a car or folding your laundry or going for a walk or sitting still and listening. I wonder. But I'm so excited because in just a moment, I'm going to be sitting down with Susan Kaiser Greenland, who is an internationally recognized leader in teaching mindfulness and meditation to children, teens, and families. She co-founded the Inner Kids Foundation, a not-profit that teaches secular mindfulness in schools and community-based programs in Greater LA. And my guest from episode number 178 has worked closely with Susan Kaiser Greenland, in fact, Annika Harris. So I am so excited for you to be here and be part of this conversation. I am going to ask her about basically this question, right? Like, mindfulness practices help us become less reactive. So how do we share it with our kids? You know, it really helps kids enormously to carry with them a set of tools to help them whenever they get upset or when life gets overwhelming. So listen for, self-compassion. We're going to talk about self-compassion, how keeping a sense of humor and taking care of ourselves are the three most important things for parents. Mindfulness. We're going to talk about mindfulness activities that help children when they're feeling upset, and that we can when we're going about teaching mindfulness to kids. She has mindfulness games. We want to teach them to kids first when they're not upset, so there's less resistance. Ding, 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 ding. Oh my gosh, why did I not think of that before? Thank you so much, Susan Kaiser Greenland. So I'm so excited for you to join me in this conversation. Before we dive in, I just want to ask you if you are subscribed to the podcast and have you left a review. We are looking to get more reviews on Apple Podcasts because it makes such a huge difference in helping people find the podcast. The vast majority of listeners listen to it on Apple Podcasts. And so if you are one of those and you haven't left your review yet, please do that. It makes a big difference. My team and I work so hard to get amazing guests for you, to put this podcast out every week. It takes the work of 3 amazing people to get it there to you, here to you, and in your ears. So please support it by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much in advance. And now, join me at the table as I talk to Susan Kaiser Greenland. All right, Susan, thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you could be here. And I'm super excited about talking about you have done an enormous amount of work about sharing mindfulness with kids, and we're going to be definitely talking about that. But first, I'm a little curious about your own journey into this. You have been studying meditation, you've been studying Buddhism for quite a while now, right?
Yeah, I have. Let's see, I think I started, I started studying in 2000. No, sorry, I started studying in 1993, I think, and have studied pretty consistently since then, although my work is secular. I draw from Buddhist roots in a lot of the work. I draw from universal themes and contemplative practices, but I also draw from science and psychology and good educational systems and just plain old common sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what brought you to your study in the first place?
Well, we had a family crisis, and there was a health crisis, and so it's actually kind of a long but a funny story if you want to hear it. I was at the time a lawyer because I was a lawyer for almost 20 years, representing owned and operated radio and network stations for TV and television stations for networks, first for ABC and later for CBS. And I had a toddler, and I was pregnant with the next one, and those kids are now 28 and 25, so it was a while ago. And and my husband got a lousy diagnosis, although he's absolutely fine now. And so I was looking for alternative ways of helping treatment. He was also in conventional treatment. And so I kind of decided that we were poisoning ourselves with the food we were eating. So I got a little bit obsessive, which is something that I am capable of doing. And I started going through all of the cupboards and getting rid of anything with sugar or processed ingredients or anything like that. And one day my husband asked me to go to a meditation class. And I thought, oh, well, he's got this health thing going on. I can understand why he wants to go. And he said, no, 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 honey, it's not for me. It's for you because you're driving me crazy about this food. And so that's how I started. And it's interesting. And I think it might help some of your parents out there. The first meditation class I took a 20-minute introduction. And then I went and I sat in the Zen Center, and I could not sit on that cushion for more than 2 or 3 minutes. It was a half hour, maybe it was 20 minutes, half hour sit, and my husband stayed the whole time, but I literally went running out of the room because I was in a very difficult time, and I had kept myself very distracted by all of these work projects, being a mom, and this food thing that I thought was helpful. And had in that process not allowed myself to really feel the feelings I had being a young mom who was working with a baby on the way and a husband who was sick. And so I really
Oh, wow.
noticed those feelings for the first time on that cushion, and I just couldn't tolerate it.
Oh, wow.
So I hope that that is an inspiring story for people, because it's 20-ish years later, more than 20 years later now, and I'm teaching the stuff, and this type of work has transformed my life. But at the time, it took me a while to kind of find my way in.
You were like, what is this craziness? I can't handle it. Yeah, I guess you were probably in a major kind of like, I mean, you kind of strike me as like an achiever, Susan, right? You're like, you're like a person who really gets things done. And so I imagine at that time, you were just like, there are problems, we will fix them. There was the to-do list, and the numbing was happening through the to-do list, right? That's kind of like, I feel like that's mom's numbing of choices, the to-do list. And it sounds like it was kind of that way for you.
Exactly. And those it's not the worst thing in the world to numb a little bit sometimes. It kind of helps you titrate, you take in as much as you can take, and then
Mhm.
you can have these coping mechanisms. But ultimately it catches up with us if we don't really sit with whatever it is that's happening and experience it.
So how did you get from how did you get from running out of the room to having this be such an important part of your life?
Well, I gave it a rest for a while, and instead my husband and I decided to move out. We were living in Manhattan at the time, and we decided to move out of the city and out to the country where we could more easily eat organic food, all of those things that had become important to me. and I took a leave of absence. And there I happened upon different cassette tapes. That's how long ago this was. These were cassette tapes.
Cassettes. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah. And I listened to Sharon Salzberg's Loving Kindness cassette. I listened to Jack Kornfeld's Path with Heart cassette. And I'm pretty sure I listened to some of Joseph Goldstein's tracks too, because those were the three preeminent teachers at the time. And they were out at IMS, which is Insight Meditation Society in back east, not so far from where we were living. But I had two young kids at the time, and it just wasn't a good fit for me to be going off on retreat. It just wasn't going to work. And so I again hope that it's inspiring to people listening that these tapes, when they first started coming out, people in my part of the business thought, are these problematics, but they can be remarkably helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like the seeds got watered in you, and you said there is a possibility for healing. There's a possibility for being more present. It sounds like so some of the things you were struggling with was maybe like worry for your husband, and probably some anxiety was really coming up for you at that time, I imagine.
Yeah, fear. I was terrified. Yeah. Yeah. And then what happened was we moved to Los Angeles because my husband's a writer and this is where his work was. And out here, I met a meditation teacher who I will forever be grateful to. His name is Ken McLeod, and he was a local teacher. And I studied with him quite regularly for many years. And that's when things really started to shift for me, and I started to see that this practice can transform lives and people and reactive patterns in ways that I had never imagined was possible.
So, can you describe that a little bit more? Like, because sometimes I feel like I'm saying, "Oh," to a busy mom who has or a dad who is like, life is chock full. I'm like, trust me, this is going to be worth your while to find this like short amount of time and to build the seed of this practice. And here's why. But I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what were some of those fruits that you got gained from your practice.
Yeah, I think of it, and this is how I teach now. And I didn't get this then. It's been a long course of study. I still, to this day, study with teachers. I go on retreat. I'm able to now. I was never able to go on a retreat for longer than 5 days while our kids were home. It just didn't make sense. I know plenty of moms do it and plenty of dads do it, but for our family system, it just didn't make sense. But the minute they were off to college, I started really upping my retreat game. So I still study quite a bit. And in that study, it's become clear to me that across traditions, because there's differences among contemplative traditions, whether it's contemplative prayer, centering prayer, or whether it's Buddhist practice, or whether it's secular mindfulness. There are differences in language and differences in approach. But for me, as far as creating a secular program and finding something that busy anybody's, whether they're parents or lawyers or clinicians or therapists or teachers, can actually dig into, is to really think of it as a two-step approach. I mean, the first step is just a better understanding of our own and other people's nervous systems. And I have been surprised. I'm very fortunate. I have traveled all over the place and met with teachers and educators and parents quite literally across the globe, and people who are in their credential teaching kids. And I've been very surprised the lack of real basic understanding on how nervous systems work. Now that's starting to change thanks to the good work of people like Linda Graham, Dan Siegel, Tina Bryson. They're really getting out there and teaching this in a very accessible way. But first, really helping parents understand that when they're overwrought, when they're worked up, or when they're tired or hungry or stressed out, that there's a kind of evolutionary imperative that our bandwidth narrows and a kind of a survival instinct. kicks in, and that survival instinct is fight, flight, or freeze. And when that bandwidth is narrow, we really don't have the capacity to be able to think through problems, to be open, listening, and receptive. If I had known that little bit of information as a young mom or as a young wife, I would have saved the whole family system a whole lot of trouble. Because I remember when my kids were worked up, or when my husband was worked up, or when I was worked up, still going in there and trying to solve a problem, talk things through, fix it. And now with a better understanding, I know, okay, when I feel riled up, or if somebody else does, not the best time to try to solve something, but a good time to take a mindfulness-based strategy where you move your attention away from what it is you're thinking about to a neutral or a pleasant present moment experience. And in that experience, our minds start to settle. Our shoulders start to lower, our jaws start to become less tight. And that's the mindfulness-based calming strategies that really help us kind of settle out the nervous system. So that's the first key. And then to learn these calming strategies that include things like breathing on purpose, which is quite a bit different from mindful breathing, but using your breath to help regulate you.
Yeah.
And that's something that's not just used by contemplatives. I mean, first responders, folks in the military, Navy SEALs, they all have these specific breathing techniques that help them to calm and focus. So that's the mindfulness first part, the mindfulness self-regulation part. Doesn't take long to do, doesn't take long to practice. You can get that in just a few minutes a day.
Yeah.
But then comes the fun part. The fun part is then weaving in these universal themes that are threaded through contemplative traditions in general, and philosophy, and from theology, and from psychology. Themes like how everything changes. Themes like learning to let go, but that doesn't mean we just give up. Themes like being more open-minded, not everything isn't black and white. Themes like a real deep felt sense recognition that we're limited in what we know. We're limited by our perspective. We're limited by our experience. And so by taking into account that there's no way that any one of us knows all of the causes and conditions that lead up to each moment, that can seem a little bit scary, but actually when you internalize it, it's a relief. So then we just do the best we can. And maybe the most powerful and maybe the most important one for parents is a theme that relates very closely to self-compassion, which is this idea that we're basically good inside. So even when we're neurotic, even when we're stressed out, even when we're not our best selves, if when we're calmer, we look at it, that piece was likely driven by a desire for something good, a desire for our family to be well, a desire that our children don't get hurt, a desire to make some money to make our family comfortable and support them. So when we start to reframe these areas where we may have a bit of a misstep, we may not be our best self, we recognize it, we try to improve on those things so we don't do it again, but we also give ourselves a break and start to see just a manifestation of me really wanting the best for my family.
Yeah.
And those kind of themes are life-changing and transformative.
Yeah, yeah, they absolutely are. There's so much there, Susan. Just, going back to number one, the better understanding of one's own nervous system. Yeah, that is something that I teach a lot, and it's wonderful because it is it's like suddenly it's not personal. It's not me that's this thing. It's just, you got this wiring, right? This is just how it works, So it's like a big relief because we put all this weight on our shoulders to be perfect and to do it. And then it's like, oh, this is just this wiring I have. Okay, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I love that universal theme of the calming strategies. For me, I think like, the yogic breathing, right? Like let's use those strategies to calm down the body, bring in that rest and relax response. But then all of these things, like everything changing, open-mindedness, we don't know everything. Those are also things that take some weight off our shoulders too, right? We tend to, I guess I don't know, I guess what it's like the idea of a separate self, right? It's kind of like the ego that wants to put all of this weight on us and say, we should know anything, all that stuff. Do you think it's because it's like the ego that is driving us to just to think that we should just have every single answer?
Yeah, well, you're pointing to something really important there. And one of the fundamental pieces of classical practice is this loosening up of the ego. And that doesn't happen quickly. It happens over time. And it often happens just as we get a little bit older and wiser. But that loosening up of this sense of taking it personally, like you said before, or that this is about me. I mean, how rare is it that things are really about us? Or just a sense of, relaxation and softening again off of this idea of basic me, me, mine, mine. And when you start to see that shift in people, then you start to know, okay, their mindfulness, their practice is really starting to become integrated.
Yeah,
Because part of,
Mhm.
sorry,
Go ahead.
it's just part of that comes with just a recognition that it's not a zero-sum game, that everything is interconnected, that there really is it doesn't seem like it now, but there really is plenty to go around if we're able to not get hooked, our ego get hooked on these things that are hard not to take personally. And it's particularly hard because we're living in a world and relating to people who aren't actually seeing things this way.
Mhm.
We're trying to develop a less metric driven, less linear, go, do, gotta be way of being in the world in relation to people who are still very much driven by and believe in and scared of this notion that it is a zero-sum game and it is about them and all of the shame and blame and all that goes with it.
Yeah, that's true. It's like you're just kind of in the soup of a culture that is like tells you that you got to get your own and you got to get more, 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 and
Yeah.
all of those things. So it's hard to lean into those things. But congratulations, dear listener. That's exactly what you're doing right now, is watering those
That's
watering those
right.
wonderful seeds of remembering of getting that bigger, wiser perspective. So before we talk more about kind of sharing some of this with children, I'm just thinking back to you and your story, Susan. Now that you're in this place, as sort of the older, wiser version of you, if you think back to the younger version of you, what is the advice you would give yourself as a young mom?
Well, the first advice, and it's interesting because when I started, I had been teaching a lot of teachers, and a few years ago, I'd always taught parents, but a few years ago, I was asked to create a parenting program. And I thought, okay, this is going to be pretty easy because I'll just take what I've been teaching teachers and just switch it around a little bit. And then the more I really got in there and was working with parents, I realized, no, this really isn't the case because but a parent's relationship to the children is so different. And I think the first thing that we need to help parents with is self-compassion and going a whole lot easier on themselves. So I would really encourage and do really encourage young moms and dads to just try to relax around all of this and to have faith and trust that this is not a marathon, not a sprint. And if we hold a loving, attached, contained kind of family unit together or relationships together, if our relationship with our kids is, if you're really there for them, that even through the rough spots, that things have a way of working out in ways that we might not expect, and that the rough spots are actually crucial to working these things out. We're not doing our kids any favors by not allowing them to have to learn to navigate some of these rough spots. So if the more we can, as young parents, keep a sense of humor and take care of ourselves, which means remembering that we're no good to our kids or our spouse or in our job, really, if we're worn down, if we're stressed out, if we're hungry, if we're tired. So that idea of carving time out for yourself, for self-care, whether it's mindfulness practice, whether it's meditation, whether it's exercise, whether it's just listening to music, whether it's taking a book and reading and really chilling out, that feels to many young moms and dads like a selfish act. They think, oh, I would be better off really having FaceTime with my kids, or I would be better off going to work and make some more money, or any one of a number of things. But when we can reframe that for them, that if they are just a little bit less neurotic, if they are just a little bit more open and receptive and have a sense of humor and laughing and joyfulness, that that's going to have a ripple effect, and that will affect their kids, and that will affect their families and their spouses and everyone that they come into contact with, and everyone that their kids and their partners and the people around them come into contact with. So the idea of reframing taking time for yourself as one of an altruistic act as opposed to a selfish act, that's my number one advice for parents, just to remind yourself to, unless if you take good care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And then for the parents who are a little on the other side of the spectrum and are a little more self-involved, taking care of others, you also take care of yourself. It's a beautiful co-circle of reciprocity and helping. So by taking care of ourselves, we're able to help the people around us. And by helping the people around us, we take care of ourselves because it makes us feel good, and it nourishes us.
You're speaking my language, Susan. I could just give you a big old amen there. Absolutely. A big old amen. So thinking about that, like, were these things that you had to learn all on your own, or like kind of what was your own parenting like? And as you were a child, did you have to unlearn some things that were challenging? And did or maybe your parents were like crazy enlightened. I don't know. How did that go for you?
Well, my parents aren't here anymore, but I loved them,
Mhm.
and they loved us, and they wanted nothing but the best for us. But they were 50s parents, and I was very lucky. My mom had been a kindergarten teacher, and before she had kids, and then she stopped working when she did have kids, working outside of the home. So she clearly got this good attachment, stuff in early childhood, because I think all of us were, my brother, who's now passed away, unfortunately, and my sister and I all did get that solid sense of bonding with our mom. But other than that, they were 50s parents, and this stuff just wasn't widely available to them. So I did have a lot of unlearning to do. And I had another layer of unlearning to do, because I was trained as a lawyer, and that I liked that training. I don't think I could have done what I did in this field had I not had that training, because I got in very, very early. But in the process of that, my meditation I had a lot of unlearning to do, because talk about a metric driven linear way of looking at things, that I got pretty heavily conditioned towards through my professional work.
Mm, yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I think that we're in general kind of societally, it's exciting to see things spread, right? That we are growing, we are evolving. Like in my father's generation, it was completely normal for him to be beaten with a belt, and now we consider that abusive. So it's sometimes we think everything is kind of going to hell in a handbasket, but there's some incredibly good news kind of as we sort of see ourselves growing.
Yeah.
So you teach a lot of teaching and sharing mindfulness with kids. Did that come from sharing it with your own kids?
Yeah, yeah. That's how it started. And then for the last decade, most of my work has been teaching adults who are interested in working with kids. But yeah, I started with my own kids. When I started, there was no secular mindfulness out there at all, and there weren't even that many Buddhist programs. We did try to take our kids to a Buddhist family program once. It was hilarious, but it was not going to happen again. It just wasn't a good fit for us.
How old
Um,
were they? I'm just
uh,
out of curiosity.
yeah, I think our daughter was probably in about first grade, and our son was in preschool. I mean, Yeah, I'll never forget it because our son was sitting there for a while because also it was before. I mean, this was way back when people really thought you could sit with kids and with parents and have the kids sit for 10, 15 minutes quietly. It's like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So my son made it a couple minutes before he asked my husband, when do I have to stop pretending someone stole my brain? And so my husband, who was a good sport to go along with this anyway, in the first instance, just kind of looked at me and said, "We're out of here." And that was that. And it was a couple of things like that. So I got there were no yoga cushions for kids. It was that long ago. So I got a pillow, like a cushion. I got a rubber duck, and I got a rubber frog, and I put them in front of my son, who was interested in this kind of stuff. And that's how I started developing these activities. And that's what especially that first part of my work was developing activity-based mindfulness, which is our mindful games, which are these practices, these really powerful transformative practice, but embedded in an activity. It's which involves some sharing and some talking to kids about how this does apply to in real life.
So can you give us some examples of some mindfulness activities for kids?
Yeah, well, real simple ones that you can use around the house are just things like every time you go to the front door in the morning. I don't know if your house is anything like ours was, but we were shot out of a cannon in the morning. We knew we were supposed to pack lunch boxes and all that stuff, but it didn't happen. And so we were rushing, but we would stop at the door and before we left and just take a few purposeful breaths and kind of collect ourselves. So we were going out of the house in a less agitated state. And there's always the now very well known activity that I started using with kids long ago, where you put a stuffed animal on their tummy and you have them move the tummy up and down with their breathing and pretend that they're rocking a stuffed animal to sleep. And that's a very helpful bedtime ritual. And if it's a little child who's not really yet able to get this by moving their tummy up and down, or if they move their tummy up and down like that, which happens, they can just breathe naturally.
For
And
the listener, Susan is waving her arm up and down.
yeah, sorry. Yeah. If you're a mom, you can imagine it. It's like they deliberately push their stomach up and push their stomach down. Yeah. So then they can just watch the animal move up and down as they breathe. And that's a very fun and helpful and calming
cool.
Nighttime ritual.
I like
So
that one a lot.
stuff for little ones. Yeah, it's really good. And then to help them find the middle of their cushion, and to find what kind of center means through a movement activity, they sway side to side while chanting a rhyme. So they'll go tick tock like a clock until you find your center stop. And then once in the center, you can do any one of a number of things. You can ring a bell and have them, raise their hand when the sound stops, open their eyes when the sound stops, move their arm to the sound of the bell, anything like that, and then go back and forth and do the tick-tock again. Because toggling between moving activities and stillness, movement and grounding is a wonderful way to help kids get a felt sense of the kind of calming and regulatory effects of this practice, especially when kids are having a hard time sitting still. And it's also a great trauma-informed practice because if you're working with groups or, if you've got kids over, you never really know the background of all of the different children. So by including more movement in these short periods of practice, you're helping ensure that that's not going to be too much introspection for somebody who might have be triggered by that.
Yeah. So it might not be safe. That's so cool. I love those activities. I know that these are going to be spread far and wide just from sharing some of these right here and now. So listener, if you want to share a picture of your little one with the stuffed animal on the belly, I would love to see that. Make sure you tag me in it wherever you share.
Yes, and tag Hunter in a picture of them swinging side by side and chanting the rhyme.
Oh my God, I'd
love that. They love that. And then you can listen to the bell, or you can count breaths with using your fingers. You put one finger up for one breath,
Mm.
another finger up for a second breath, the third finger up for the third breath. So you sway side to side, chant the rhyme, and then you can count breaths or listen to a bell. And the kids love that, and it's fun for everybody.
So, so do you recommend some of these mindfulness? What do you see as some of the benefits for kids of doing some of these activities? For you,
Oh,
you're talking about the stuff for really pretty young kids, right?
yeah, yeah. No, the benefits for kids is, and they learn this they pick it up like sponges, and they learn it from a young age. The benefit for kids is that they really do get a set of very simple tools that are with them all the time that can help them when they're starting to feel upset or overwhelmed, or what we call around our house too much birthday. I mean, we often we always key in on when kids are upset or crying or sad, but there's also that too much birthday thing when they're just overly excited and overly stimulated, which tends to lead to somebody feeling upset about something. So when you start seeing too much birthday coming on, again, you can do these practices. And another really simple practice to remember for parents is just this general idea that a slight emphasis on the exhale is going to help with calming. So just breathing in a little bit and breathing out a whole lot. And you can do that with one finger, and you hold up your index finger and you pretend that's a flower, and you smell the flower, and then you pretend it's a candle and you blow out the candle.
Mm.
Or you can cup your hands like this, and I learned this from my friend Chris Willard, and pretend that you're holding a cup of hot chocolate, and you smell the hot chocolate through your nose and you blow out to cool it. And those are other great calming strategies. So you can imagine having a child going and then you just breathe in a little bit and breathe out a whole lot, and do
Mm.
that a few times, and that will help with that kind of manage that kind of upset. So when the kids learn these things, they integrate them, and they very quickly start bringing them out into the playground. And you hear this from teachers where there's some conflict, and somebody says, let's stop and feel our breathing or something like that.
Wow. Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, one of my favorite things that I like to share with my girls is from the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, and he talks about the idea of the hugging meditation and just a 3 breath hug. And so that's something that they seem to have they have some resistance to some of this stuff because I teach mindfulness. So they're like, oh, mom,
Yeah,
yeah. But the 3 breath hug is something that has really sort of taken hold, and we hug each other, and we say, let's take a 3 breath hug. And that feels okay. That feels good. That feels like something they really embrace.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And to extend that when they're on their own, if they don't have you to hug, or if they're not around people that they're comfortable hugging, they can do it for themselves, so that they can give themselves a hug and do a 3 breath hug. And also with that hugging, you can also wish yourself well. We
Mm.
call them friendly wishes. You can hug yourself and just imagine that you're happy and healthy and safe and living with the people you love comfortably and with peace. So that kind of mental aspiration when we're upset is also another one of these practices where you're focusing on one thing and not being distracted by the thoughts that are upsetting you. We call those anchor practices.
Yeah, and really what you're doing is you're really are, what these are really doing, you really are working with our neurobiology. Like, yeah, that just extended exhale. As soon as you do that, I've learned in my yoga training that, an inhale is like a mini fight, flight, or freeze response, and an exhale is sort of like a mini rest and relax response as far as the way the nervous system takes it. So it really does a lot of clear explanation for, like, oh, well, in yogic breathing, if you just exhale slightly longer, then you're spending more time in that rest and relax response, and then it changes the body. And so if you're blowing out a candle, you know, you're really doing that. But just the,
It's a way of turning that into a
yeah,
game.
yeah, turn
That's
it
what
into,
you turn it into a game. And then you play those games at times when somebody isn't upset. And the reason you
mm,
do that is so that then when you need to pull it out when somebody is upset, you've already taught the game. So that's why it's so important to establish these games as just games and not some, clinical intervention, or not because the child is sick or, something, but it's just, these are
mm,
games we play. Oh, and by the way, let's play it now when things look pretty rough. Now, one of the important pieces of this, though, when we're using mindfulness-based calming strategies to help calm children when they're upset, is to acknowledge the emotion first, not
yes.
to use this as a way of sweeping this all under the rug. So we acknowledge the emotion, or acknowledge that something rotten happened. Oh, pal, I'm sorry, or oh, buddy, I'm sorry. I know that really, that's I'm really sorry that happened. Um, and then, but can we also try to fill in the blank? Can we try to calm our bodies? Or that's another place where gratitude and appreciation comes in. So you wouldn't do this if a really tragic event had happened with a child, but if a child had a disappointment, you acknowledge the disappointment. Oh, buddy, I'm really sorry about that. And are there three good things that are happening too? As a way of broadening your perspective, that it's not just there is something lousy happening, but let's not just focus on that. Let's broaden and see, oh, there's some good things happening too. And we have games that we play, um, that establish this in a fun way when somebody isn't upset, like kids sitting in a circle, or a mom in front, or dad in front of their child, rolling a ball back and forth. And I joke it's called the whining game, and you complain about something. Oh, wow, I was late for the meeting today because traffic was bad. But then when you roll the ball, you say, but life is good. Or you roll the ball and you say, but still I feel lucky because, I got to the meeting and I was able to sort it out. And the kids can say, I feel rotten today because I don't want to be here. I would rather be at the playground, but I'm still happy to be playing this game with you. And that is a way of acknowledging the challenges, the disappointments, the upsets, but broadening our view to realize, yeah, there's some lousy stuff, but there's good stuff too.
Yeah, and you're really teaching them just simple, beautiful perspective in that. That's really wonderful. I love that. I'm going to try the rolling the ball game. We'll see if my 12-year-old and my 9-year-old will accept that. We'll see how
Let
it
me
goes.
know. I bet they will. I bet they will.
Yeah.
Because especially if you keep the ball going faster. So, and if you
Mm,
add more people to it. So, because it gets funny. It gets really
mm,
funny. The other benefit, if you do that with a group, is that we all start to see or be reminded of the commonality of uh, our challenges.
mm.
And if somebody does say something that is very upsetting, you can always say, how many other people have had that happen? And usually other people will raise their hand. So it helps people feel that they're not alone in their challenges.
Yes, yes, I'm going to totally try that. I love that. And if you try it to your listener, I want to hear how it goes. I'm really curious. Susan, this is so wonderful. I would just love to like pick your brain about all these things forever. And I love all the things that you've shared, and you have wonderful ways to share this with the world. You have some books, you have some programs. So where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. For these games, all of these games are there. I've written two books that include a lot of these games, The Mindful Child and Mindful Games. But there's also a set of activity cards that I created with my friend Annika Harris that has the games on them that you can just pull one out and do. So those are ways to get these games and to try them. Also, if you go to my website, susankaisergreenland.com, I know it's long, but that's my name. Um, You'll see videos of the games, guided meditations, audios of the game, pictures, blogs, profiles of industry leaders, that sort of thing. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get this kind of stuff in the mail. And last but not least is that just yesterday, a program that I created with Sounds True, Mindful Parent, Mindful Child, was released. And that's 30 10-ish minute guided meditations a day. The idea is you listen to one for 30 days in a row, but you can skip around and just re-listen to ones that resonate. But they are intended for parents, and they are built or structured around this idea that I was talking about at the beginning, that we learn these mindfulness-based self-regulation skills first. And then when we do, we've got the bandwidth and the capacity to be able to think about and learn these universal themes that we've been talking about.
So cool. Well, Susan, I thank you for doing this work, for taking that intense lawyer brain and shining it into the world of mindfulness, and especially for children, it's a real gift for all of us. So that I know is creating amazing ripple effects. So I just want to thank you for doing this wonderful work, and for coming on and sharing with us here on the Mindful Mama podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for having this podcast. I think it's the focus for mindfulness in kids has been, for so much of the time that this movement has been evolving, on schools. And I love that you're focusing on parents, because that's really where it all begins. And once we start getting the parents have their own practice, the surest way for them to teach mindfulness to their kids is to have mindfulness themselves. So thank you for getting the word out there.
Thank you so much for listening. I love what Susan says about self-compassion, keeping a sense of humor. Oh, we need that so much. And yeah, teaching mindfulness when they're not upset. Oh, that makes such a big difference. If you would like more mindfulness in your life, dear listener, we have lots of amazing resources for you, including an audio guide if you go over to the website, mindfulmomguide.com, we have a great audio guide for you that will help you create your own practice, which is the most important thing, right? If we want to have this in their life, we need to have it in our lives. We can't just say, do what I do and not do what I say and not what I do, right? So check that out at mindfulmomguide.com. Hey, have you left your review on Apple Podcasts for the Mindful Mama podcast yet? Because it makes such a big difference. It makes a huge difference. So please, please, please support the podcast by leaving a great review on Apple Podcasts. It will, every time I read those, it makes me smile hugely. It lifts me up when I'm getting down, but you don't do it just for me. Do it because it helps so many other people just find out about all these great resources that are here for you for free on the Mindful Mama podcast. And I really want to share these free resources as widely as possible. It's part of my mission, and I hope that you can help me and help, everyone change generational patterns. And you can do that by just leaving a review and, of course, sharing it with friends and things like that. That makes such a big difference. So thank you in advance. And just a personal report, I am still on my French home exchange adventure. I will tell you more about it when I return. So that's what's happening with me and with you. I'm wishing you a beautiful week. I'm wishing you some calm. I hope you don't need to practice staying calm in the eye of the storm too much this week. Although if you do, know that it just makes you stronger. And if you can't stay calm, hopefully let that help you cultivate your own compassion, your own self-compassion, compassion for others. Yes. But I am wishing you a nice, peaceful week where you don't have to practice any of those things and you just smile a whole lot. And yeah, I'm wishing that for me too. I'm wishing that for all of us. So let's practice. Let's practice to be present, to accept and love ourselves, accept and love our children, and we'll practice that together this week. Sound good? Yeah, to me too. All right. I will be back next week oh my goodness, talking with my dear friend Carla Nomberg about how to stop losing your beep with your kids. So be here next week. All right. Talk to you then. Namaste. Are you frustrated with parenting? Do you want to practice conscious, compassionate parenting, but you don't know how? It's not easy, and there's no roadmap for this. Until now. I'm Hunter Clark-Fields, creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I know how frustrating it is because I've been there. I struggled as a young mom, and when I found myself yelling and triggered by my child, I knew there had to be a better way, and there is. Mindful parenting is different from other parenting trainings. They don't tell you that all of that good advice is as good as useless when our internal stress response is triggered. Mindful parenting teaches you research-based tools and practices to reduce your stress response so that you can respond rather than react. And it teaches you exactly what to say so that you can create willing cooperation from your child. You can learn more and enroll at mindfulparentingcourse.com, and you can join us for a free live training coming up soon where you'll learn why your kids don't listen to you, how your brain undermines your parenting, and how to create cooperative kids without losing your temper. Sign up now at mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. That's mindfulparentingcourse.com/free training. I'll see you there.